Good afternoon, New Yorkers. My fellow New Yorkers, workers, families, immigrants, and dreamers who make this city the beating heart of America. Thank you for being here today. As your mayor-elect, I've spent the last decade fighting for transparency, justice, and accountability in the face of power that too often hides in the shadows. From the streets of Astoria to the halls of Albany, I've stood with survivors, with communities under attack, and against the corruption that poisons our democracy. Today, I speak to you not just as a leader, but as a New Yorker who believes that no one, not even a president, is above the truth. After months of mounting pressure, controversy, and broken promises, the House Oversight Committee has released more than 20,000 emails from Jeffrey Epstein's private estate. And buried within those thousands of pages is a truth that has now become impossible to ignore. Donald Trump's name appears hundreds of times throughout the documents. The evidence he desperately tried to keep hidden has finally erupted in his face. But this isn't just about old emails or long-standing rumors about two wealthy men who knew each other decades ago. This is about what happens when a president who promised maximum transparency about the Epstein investigation finds himself on the wrong side of his own promises, when a convicted sex offender's private messages directly contradict the president's public statements, and when the very files Trump said would vindicate him instead paint a picture of a man who is rapidly running out of excuses. The Epstein scandal has haunted Donald Trump for years. Back on the campaign trail, Trump made a sweeping promise to his supporters. If elected, his administration would release all of the Justice Department files related to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. I will release the Epstein files, he promised. It was a simple, unambiguous commitment, maximum transparency, full disclosure. No more hiding. His base celebrated this promise. They believed that once the files were released, the truth would vindicate Trump and expose the real connections. The connections, they believed, between Epstein and Democratic figures like Bill Clinton and Larry Summers. The conspiracy theories were elaborate, detailed, and widely shared across social media. Trump's supporters genuinely believed that the Epstein files would prove that Trump was clean and that it was the Democrats who had something to hide. Then Trump won the presidency, and something changed. Attorney General Pam Bondi, Trump's pick to lead the Justice Department, was initially positioned as a champion of transparency. In February, when asked about releasing the Epstein files, Bondi said casually, "It's sitting on my desk right now to review." The message seemed clear. The documents would be released soon. Months passed. Nothing happened. By July, when conservative influencers and MAGA loyalists began demanding that Bondi actually deliver on Trump's promise, the Justice Department released a statement claiming that a review of its holdings had uncovered no evidence of any client list kept by Epstein or other evidence that would predicate a criminal investigation of any uncharged parties. In other words, there's nothing to see here. Move along. But there was something to see, and Trump knew it. For months, Trump's own administration resisted releasing the files. It publicly claimed this was about protecting privacy and respecting grand jury proceedings, but behind the scenes, something else was happening. Trump was calling his own supporters stupid and accusing them of falling for a hoax. He was deflecting. He was dismissing. He was doing exactly what he had promised the American people he would not do. Then came November 12, 2025. The House Oversight Committee, controlled by Trump's own party but increasingly frustrated with the administration's stonewalling, made a unilateral decision. They released the emails themselves, thousands of pages, tens of thousands of messages. And buried within those documents was evidence that directly contradicted Trump's most carefully constructed narrative about his relationship with Epstein. The scale of Trump's mentions in these files is staggering. Trump's name appears hundreds of times, not dozens, not a handful, hundreds. And what Epstein wrote about Trump is particularly revealing. In one email, Epstein dismissed Trump sharply. "Your world does not understand how dumb he really is. He will blame everyone around him." A year later, he described Trump as evil beyond belief, mad, nuts. These weren't casual remarks. These were Epstein's private, unfiltered assessments of the man who would become president of the United States. But the most explosive emails go further. In one message to author Michael Wolff, Epstein flatly rejected Trump's repeatedly told story, the narrative that Trump had expelled Epstein from Mar-a-Lago for inappropriate behavior. Epstein wrote, "Trump said he asked me to resign, never a member ever." In another email, Epstein claimed a woman who worked at Mar-a-Lago had been involved with him and wrote, "Trump knew of it and came to my house many times during that period." And then, in perhaps the most damning line of all, Epstein wrote to Ghislaine Maxwell in 2011, "That dog that hasn't barked is Trump has spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned." Do you understand what that means? Epstein was saying that Trump had spent time at his house with one of his trafficking victims. That Trump, according to Epstein's own emails, knew what was happening. That Trump, despite all the available evidence suggesting he was aware of Epstein's crimes, has never been implicated or mentioned in connection with those activities. The implication, written in Epstein's own words, is clear. Trump knew. The White House immediately issued a denial. A press statement claimed that Virginia Giuffre, a prominent Epstein accuser, had testified that Trump did not participate in anything inappropriate. But here's the problem. Virginia Giuffre committed suicide earlier this year. She cannot defend or clarify her own testimony, and Epstein's emails suggest something more nuanced than a simple yes or no question about Trump's direct participation in sexual crimes. The emails suggest Trump's knowledge, Trump's presence, Trump's awareness of what was happening. This is not speculation. These are Epstein's own words released by the House Oversight Committee, now part of the public record and impossible to ignore. How did Trump respond? Exactly as predicted. He did what he always does when confronted with evidence that makes him uncomfortable. He deflected, he dismissed, he attacked, he lied. Within hours of the emails becoming public, Trump took to Truth Social and demanded that the Justice Department investigate not Trump himself, but rather Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, Reid Hoffman, J.P. Morgan Chase, and many other people and institutions. He claimed without any evidence that all arrows point to the Democrats. He called the entire Epstein file release an Epstein hoax orchestrated by Democrats to distract from other issues. He told his supporters that the real story here wasn't about Trump. It was about Clinton. It was about the banks. It was about the Democrats. It was, in other words, a textbook Trump deflection. When confronted with uncomfortable truths, don't address them. Don't answer the questions. Instead, attack the people asking the questions. Demand an investigation into someone else, change the subject, control the narrative, claim the whole thing as a hoax. But here's what's critical to understand. This strategy is running out of runway. The evidence isn't going away. The emails aren't going away. Trump's name appearing hundreds of times in Epstein's private correspondence isn't going away. And every time Trump refuses to answer questions about the Epstein files, every time he attacks reporters who ask about them, every time he calls the whole thing a hoax, he is broadcasting to the American people that he has something to hide. The pattern of Trump's responses to questions about Epstein is remarkably consistent and remarkably telling. When reporters ask him directly about his relationship with Epstein, Trump does one of three things. He shuts down the conversation entirely, he dismisses the allegations as a hoax perpetrated by Democrats, or he deflects and talks about something else entirely. He has never, in any meaningful way, addressed the substance of the emails or the questions they raise. When asked about his appearances in the Epstein files, Trump responded, No, she's given us just a very quick briefing," referring to Attorney General Bondi. He made baseless claims that the files were created by his political enemies. He suggested without evidence that they had been doctored by Democrats. But he didn't address the emails themselves. He didn't explain what Epstein meant when he wrote about Trump knowing about the girls. He didn't clarify his relationship with Epstein or his visits to Epstein's homes. He simply refused to engage with the substance. This refusal to engage is itself revealing. If Trump truly believed the emails were fabricated or doctored, wouldn't he want to prove it? Wouldn't he want to present evidence? Wouldn't he want his legal team to analyze the documents and demonstrate their authenticity issues? Instead, he simply asserts without proof that they are fake. He calls them a hoax. He blames Democrats. He moves on. The Wall Street Journal reported that Trump's administration had promised to release documents from the Epstein investigation, but then retreated from that promise. Trump then denied the very existence of credible evidence while simultaneously claiming that Democrats had fabricated documents. These contradictory statements, all made by the same person in the same week, paint a picture of someone who is improvising, who is desperate, who is losing control of the narrative. Consider the timeline of what happened. For months, Trump controlled the release of information. He used his attorney general to slow walk the process. He used his Justice Department to claim there was no credible evidence. He directed his supporters to stop complaining about the lack of transparency. He called them stupid for believing in the Epstein hoax. But then, when the House Oversight Committee took matters into their own hands and released the emails directly, Trump's carefully constructed narrative collapsed. And what did he do? He immediately attempted to regain control by launching an investigation into everyone except himself. He weaponized the Justice Department to turn attention away from his own name appearing hundreds of times in the Epstein emails. He took the aggressive, belligerent posture he always takes when cornered. What Trump doesn't seem to understand, or perhaps he does, and that's the problem, is that his response itself is damning. An innocent person confronted with 23,000 pages of emails containing hundreds of references to himself would likely want to engage with those documents. An innocent person would likely want to clarify the record. An innocent person would likely want to explain their relationship with the named individual. An innocent person would likely be interested in understanding what the emails actually say. But Trump isn't doing any of that. Instead, he is dismissing the entire enterprise as a hoax, attacking the people who released the files, demanding investigations into other people, and refusing to answer substantive questions about his own involvement or knowledge. This is the behavior of someone who knows that the truth, if fully articulated, would be damaging to him. The critical emails deserve particular attention. When Epstein wrote to Ghislaine Maxwell, his longtime partner in crime, that dog that hasn't barked is Trump, he was making a calculated assessment. He was noting that despite Trump's close association with him, despite Trump's visits to his homes, despite Trump's familiarity with his world, Trump had never been implicated or discussed publicly in connection with Epstein's crimes. Epstein seemed almost surprised by this. He seemed to be documenting it as if he found it notable that Trump had remained untouched by the scandal, despite what Epstein believed Trump knew. What does it mean that Epstein knew of it? What does it mean that Epstein believed Trump had spent hours at his house with a sex trafficking victim? These are not trivial questions. These are direct, specific claims made by the man at the center of one of the largest sex trafficking operations in American history. The emails also show Epstein describing Trump in increasingly hostile and contemptuous terms as the years progressed. It wasn't Epstein speaking fondly of an old friend. It was Epstein expressing disgust, contempt, and disdain for Trump. It was Epstein describing Trump as fundamentally evil and deranged. These private assessments are jarring because they come from someone who had access to Trump's private world, who had spent time in Trump's spaces, who clearly knew things about Trump that Trump would prefer remained private. Now, the Trump administration has been scrambling to contain the damage. The White House has pointed to Virginia Giuffre's testimony that Trump did not participate in anything inappropriate. But this is a convenient oversimplification of what her testimony actually addressed and what the Epstein emails actually suggest. The emails aren't necessarily alleging that Trump participated in sexual crimes. They're suggesting something potentially more complex, that Trump knew about what was happening, that Trump visited Epstein's homes during the period when trafficking was occurring, and that Trump was aware of victims being present in those spaces. Trump has pushed back against this interpretation, and his Justice Department is now investigating other figures mentioned in the Epstein files: Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, Reid Hoffman, and financial institutions like J.P. Morgan Chase. These are not trivial people. Clinton had a documented association with Epstein. Summers exchanged emails with Epstein that show concerning behavior toward women. Hoffman has already publicly apologized for his association with Epstein. J.P. Morgan paid more than $450 million in settlements related to its banking relationship with Epstein. But here's the crucial distinction. None of these investigations into other people changes what we know about Trump. The emails mentioning Trump have not disappeared. The questions about Trump's knowledge and his relationship with Epstein remain unanswered. Trump's strategy of investigating everyone else is a classic deflection tactic. It's an attempt to muddy the waters, to suggest that if other powerful people were involved with Epstein, then the attention on Trump is unfair or politically motivated. But this is a false equivalency. The existence of Clinton's problems with Epstein does not erase Trump's documented relationship with Epstein. The existence of Summers' uncomfortable emails does not explain away what Epstein wrote about Trump. What makes this moment particularly significant is that Trump now controls the Justice Department. He controls the investigation into other figures. He controls the narrative about what the Epstein files do and do not contain. And yet, despite this enormous power, he has chosen the path of denial and deflection rather than the path of transparency and engagement. If Trump truly believed that full transparency would vindicate him, why wouldn't he want every single file released? Why wouldn't he want every email examined? Why wouldn't he welcome the scrutiny? The answer is obvious: because he believes the files will hurt him. He believes that the full truth, when exposed, will be damaging to his image, his credibility, or potentially his legal standing. This belief itself is a form of admission. Throughout his political career, Trump has relied on a particular strategy for dealing with controversy: attack the credibility of the messenger, question the authenticity of the evidence, suggest that the whole thing is a political conspiracy against him, and then move on to the next topic before substantive accountability can develop. This strategy has worked remarkably well for Trump in the past. His supporters are disposed to believe that he is being persecuted. The media narrative is often chaotic enough that attention does move to the next controversy, and there is genuine partisan disagreement about what various pieces of evidence actually mean. But the Epstein files are different. These are primary source documents from Epstein himself. They are not allegations made by his critics. They are not interpretations of his actions. They are his own words, written in his own emails, expressing his own thoughts about Trump, and no amount of deflection can change what Epstein actually wrote. No amount of attacking Democrats for releasing the files can alter the fact that the files exist and contain what they contain. Trump is also now in a different position than he was during his first term. He doesn't have a Department of Justice fully under his control in the same way he did before. He has House Democrats who have access to the Epstein files and are willing to release them. He has a growing number of Republicans, particularly those not seeking re-election, who are willing to push for transparency. He has a media environment that is more fragmented and more resistant to simple narrative control than it was in 2017. The growing evidence that emerges from the Epstein files suggests a man, Trump, who has something to hide. It suggests a man who knows more about Epstein's activities than he has publicly admitted. It suggests a man who is willing to weaponize the Justice Department, willing to attack his own supporters for believing in transparency, and willing to engage in elaborate deflection to avoid addressing the central questions. What did Trump know about Epstein's crimes? What was the nature of their relationship? What was Trump doing at Epstein's homes? What did Trump understand about the women and girls present in those spaces? These questions are not going to go away. New evidence continues to emerge as researchers and journalists comb through the thousands of emails. Each piece of new evidence brings renewed scrutiny. Each new revelation puts Trump back on defense. And each time Trump responds with denial, dismissal, or deflection, he further convinces a segment of the American public that he is hiding something significant. The ultimate irony is that Trump himself created the conditions for this unfolding disaster. He promised to release the Epstein files. He gave his supporters hope that full transparency would vindicate him. He positioned himself as the champion of truth against a conspiracy of lies. And then, when those files were released, whether by his own administration or by the House Oversight Committee, they contained evidence that contradicted his carefully constructed narrative. Now, Trump is running out of excuses. The files are not going away. His name is not disappearing from them. The questions about his knowledge and involvement are not being resolved by deflection and denial. And the growing body of evidence suggests that Trump knows exactly why he doesn't want these files fully examined, because the truth, when finally exposed, will not be kind to him. The Epstein scandal is not going away. Trump is running out of time. And when a reporter finally asks him a question about the Epstein files that he cannot dodge, cannot deflect, and cannot dismiss as a hoax, then the American people will finally see what Trump's real colors truly look like, the colors of a man who has something very significant to hide. As your next mayor, I commit to New York. We will fight for survivors. We will demand accountability from the highest office. We will build a city where truth triumphs over lies, where justice outlasts deflection. Thank you, and God bless New York, and may justice prevail for all.